Are you struggling with making a decision whether you should buy a vintage synthesizer clone or the original counterpart? Hi there, this is Ralph, and in this video I'm giving you my reasons why I now prefer vintage synthesizer clones over their original counterparts. And perhaps my reasons will help you to make up your mind and reach a decision on this topic. This is actually a kind of video which I have never done before because there is a very personal and emotional flavor to it. Actually, I was working on another video, but then something unexpected happened that made me stop and then shoot this video instead. So please indulge me. I want to start by showing you the angle where I am coming from. I belong to the Generation X. For the younger folks out there who are watching my video now and who don't know what the Generation X actually is, I suggest just Google it and read up on it. But I'm giving you a light-hearted explanation now. We Generation X people saw the very first Star Wars movie as children at the movie theater. The American kids saw it in 1977 and we German kids saw it in 1978, and in 1985 we saw Back to the Future, and until this very day we still think that Back to the Future is one of the most funny movies ever produced, and in 1990 we were blown away by the incredible special effects of the sci-fi movie Total Recall. That means that Generation X people who are also fans of electronic music have some kind of special nostalgic and emotional relationship with synthesizers that were used by electronic music artists like Tangerine Dream, Jean-Michel Jarre, Larry Fast, Tomita, Klaus Schulze, and by 1980s bands and artists like Howard Jones, Simple Minds, Depeche Mode, and Duran Duran, to just name a few. Most of the synthesizers used by these artists were actually out of reach for most of us because they had a huge price tag attached to them. Before shooting this video, I was working on another video about my Oberheim OB1 and the Behringer UBXA. And all of a sudden, the pitch bend section of the Oberheim OB1 was not working properly any longer. The fault is not rendering the OB1 useless, but it's somehow inhibiting the musical expressiveness of the synthesizer. And it's always a good feeling to have all options at your disposal. Conclusion: the synthesizer requires a service. And repairing a vintage synthesizer is a bit more costly and time-consuming than having a contemporary synthesizer serviced. I have been using several vintage synthesizers since the 1980s. You can hear and see them in many of my synth live jams and music videos here on my YouTube channel. And I have grown very fond of them over the years. But I can tell you that sooner or later every vintage synthesizer will start to develop some issues. And there is no guarantee that another component of a vintage synthesizer starts malfunctioning even if you had the synthesizer just serviced. That already happened to me before. To be clear, I'm not planning to sell off my vintage synthesizers because I have my own personal and emotional relationship with them. But buying another new vintage synthesizer on the second-hand market is no option for me any longer. In 2017, I bought my first vintage synth clone, the Roland Studio Electronic SE02. It has been designed after the Minimoog, although some would argue it's not a real clone because it includes too many new features over the original. Nevertheless, I never had any issues with it so far. Or another example, I own an original ARP 2600 which I have been using extensively over the years. You can see and hear it in many of my tutorials here on my YouTube channel. Check it out. But by now it really needs a maintenance service. But since my Behringer 2600 Black Orange, Blue Marvin and Grey Mini are working so flawlessly, I have been postponing the ARP 2600 service over and over again. Just consider the following points before buying a vintage synth. While the originals may hold sentimental value and historical significance, vintage synth clones offer several benefits that make them superior in many aspects. Firstly, Vintage Synth Clones are more readily available and affordable compared to the original models, which are often rare and very expensive. This allows more musicians to enjoy the unique classic sounds and features of a vintage synth without breaking the bank. Additionally, vintage synth clones often come with modern upgrades and improvements such as MIDI compatibility and USB connectivity. This provides greater versatility and convenience for musicians who are looking to integrate vintage sound into their modern and contemporary studio setups. Furthermore, vintage synth clones are typically more reliable and easier to maintain than their aging counterparts. With new components and manufacturing techniques, these clones offer the iconic vintage sound without the reliability issues and shortage of original spare parts that often come with the older instruments. I can really attest to that. In conclusion, vintage synth clones combine the best of both worlds. The classic sound of a vintage synthesizer with the convenience and reliability of modern technology. Personally, I think there are only two reasons for buying an original vintage synthesizer. Firstly, if you have a very strong emotional and nostalgic connection to a certain vintage synthesizer and there is no clone version on the market, then go for it. Or if you are a do-it-yourself guy and you enjoy sourcing spare components on the internet, taking synthesizers apart and fixing them, then by all means go for it too. But for me personally, I rather use a synthesizer to make music without worrying about any technical issues. I have no plans of acquiring any more vintage synthesizers because I'm busy with maintaining the vintage stuff that I already have. And luckily, I also have another option. I have a couple of friends from whom I could borrow a particular vintage synthesizer if I want to make music or a video with it. That's another advantage of being a Generation X person, having friends who still own their synthesizers from the 1980s. What is your opinion about vintage synthesizers and their original counterparts? What do you prefer? What are your reasons for buying a clone or an original? I would like to hear from you. Kindly write a comment below. And if you want to do me a favor, please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so yet. I really appreciate your support. Alright friends, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again in my next video. Until then, take care, stay safe, and peace.